Venue guests clamored over the dramatic sight they were witnessing. Scarlett L. Vendimian stood shocked. Her fiancé, Prince Kyle, told her he'd say this as many times as needed. At this very moment, he was canceling his engagement with her, and instead make a new engagement with the girl by his side, Lady Terraneza Hopkins. Everyone clapped with him announcing her as his new wife-to-be. Terraneza vowed as his fiancée to deepen their love and live a long, happy married life. And he just had to add, "Oh, my Terraneza, what a cute and smart woman you are." Completely different from that emotionless woman. Referring to Scarlett, of course. In his eyes, for 17 years until now, playing pretend while being engaged to a boring woman like her was the biggest disgrace in his glorious life. Respectfully questioning his decision of annulment, Scarlett brought up how their marriage was decided before they were born. She didn't believe he alone could cancel it, to which he replied, of course he could, since it was an engagement with someone full of crimes. He's heard everything from Terraneza. Jealous upon seeing his love is turned towards her, he accused Scarlett of bullying her repeatedly around the academy. Oh my gosh, Terraneza's putting on the crocodile sniffles. However, not only did Scarlett not recall such a thing, but this was also her first time meeting Terraneza. Dun dun dun! The drama's getting juicy. Prince Kyle got angry. Now he believed Scarlett was discriminating against Terraneza just because she was in the regular class and Scarlett was in the special. He called her a bigot and said she should know some shame. He began announcing Scarlett's numerous crimes one by one. She supposedly doodled on Terraneza's notes, locked her in the toilet, and spread bad rumors. He even pushed her down the stairs. This is where Terraneza let off a nasty smirk. Scarlett was done with this. She was willing to let everyone interpret things how they liked. She accepted cancellation. Kyle found this defiance befitting her filthy nature. In dramas and theater, he knew women like her were called a villainess. And Terraneza had the audacity to utter, "Idiot." What a disgusting witch. Being called a villainess, Scarlett felt there was no need to hold back. Before leaving, she said, "May I ask for one final thing?" Kyle was about to deny her, until Terraneza gave him the, Now. She said final, after all. That should be fine. And he began to gush over his merciful woman before asking Scarlett for her wish. Scarlett stepped towards them for her final request. "May I punch that over there? They definitely weren't ready for her to come swinging." Monologuing Scarlett's thoughts. "Now, ladies and gentlemen, I, Scarlett L. Vendimian, would like to tell you why my emotions exploded recently. Terraneza and the stupid prince pissed me off. Indeed. However, to fully understand the scope of my anger, we have to go back. Since I was young, I've always loved hitting people. Back then, her older brother Leonardo questioned why she beat up the son of the Alexia family. It was only acceptable that time, since she saved a commoner. She reasoned that she didn't just punch anyone. There had to always be a reason. This time, it was for the world and the people." Leonardo sighed, remembering the scene with her beaming happily with blood all over. She was obviously enjoying herself, and hitting him with the light, "Oh my," she definitely didn't feel guilty about it. He then reminded her that after next week's soiree, she'd finally be a part of noble society, and pleaded with her to stop doing violence and to act like a lady. At the party, the prince rudely greeted her with, "So you are Scarlett." She then politely introduced herself with full name and title as the daughter of a duke, and to this he replied that she must be stupid. If he asked if she was Scarlett, her only answer should be yes. He didn't ask her to introduce herself, and declaring her his servant from now on, she was irritated. This was her first encounter with Prince Kyle von Palestin, their country's second prince and her fiancé. It was also the beginning of her hellish days. Prince Kyle subjected her to various kinds of pranks and bullying. She would ask her father if it was too much, but he'd only apologize, since this was an engagement with the royal family. She endured and endured and endured. She kept holding herself back. Then, time passed. She turned 15 years old and enrolled in the Royal Aristocratic Academy. Her peers thought she was so cool and beautiful. She got the top grade for the last magic exam. Known as the Icy Rose who excelled in pen and sword, she was the pride of the special class. Except when it came to Prince Kyle. In front of the other students, he ordered her to be his slave. But in this period, she gained a steel heart that wouldn't budge no matter what he did to her. When lunch breaks hit, he'd storm into her class, asking why she was here and not buying him lunch. She coldly replied with apologies and that she'd buy it immediately, and her friends could do nothing about his abuse. He was a prince. He even had his friends watch them in case they told any teachers. Alone, he'd scold her for getting good grades and being full of herself. He couldn't stand that she was in the special class while he was in the regular. He wasn't going to let the disrespect go on any longer. He pulled out a blade, threatening to cut her silver hair and bring it to the regular class as a trophy. This is some cartoonishly evil-ish. She asked him to stop, or she'd tell her father, but he already knew Duke Van Diemen was nothing more than his father's lapdog. Their engagement wouldn't end unless he wanted it, and she was going to live her entire life as his slave. At this point, she was about ready to punch him, until another boy said, "Could you do your lover's quarrel somewhere else? I can't even take a nap." Sitting in a tree above was the first prince, Julius von Palestine. He jumped down, taunting his brother for dropping to the regular class for doing useless things like this. Oh, I see where this is going. Kyle is the second prince with a chip on his shoulder who compares himself to his more talented older brother. Julius ignored Kyle to greet Scarlet and apologize on his brother's behalf. Scarlet replied it was fine, since this happens all the time. And man, Julius was not going to let this slide. He's heard of his brother's childish pranks and tantrums, but he didn't know Kyle was threatening her with a dagger daily. Kyle threw a fit about how it was all Scarlet's fault. She never respected him, despite being his fiancée. He tried calling Sigurd to take Julius away, but Sigurd couldn't honor that request, since Julius was also of royal blood. Kyle glared angrily at Scarlet, saying, "I'll get you for this," before running off. Afterwards, she thanked Julius for saving her. But he had to ask, who was really saved? She could tell he noticed she was about to send Kyle to the grave. We then learned he was sitting in the tree reading to avoid people flocking around him during break. In the kingdom of Palestine, there were two princes. The first prince, son of the queen, Prince Julius was originally meant to be heir. Due to his righteous personality, a part of the corrupt nobles felt he was a threat to their interests. So, the stupid second prince, Kyle, was the one they supported as the next king. Thanks to that, faction clashes occurred every day, even at the academy. He now thought spending time in the classroom after this wasn't so shabby, because looking at Scarlet, he felt he found something way more interesting than reading books. There was a brief moment of fluttering charm Scarlet felt, and then a quick coldness. At the exam grade announcement board, the students clamored over the shocking results. They couldn't believe Scarlet lost to Julius. She'd been in first place for the 3 main courses all this time, and for her, perfect scores for all courses was inconceivable. For the swordsmanship and magic exams, even if she got a score of 99, even if she defeated the instructor, they'd dock her for not liking her form, or a slight imperfection in her magic formula. She couldn't stand the fact that Julius got the scores she failed to seize. With him coming up to greet her, he'd whisper, it was surprisingly easy to get a perfect score for the top spot. Enraging her, she punched her wall, wondering if she should interpret that as a personal challenge. Whenever she was defeated, she'd return it tenfold. Re-seizing the top grade, she was sparkling. This time, Julius came by, patting her head as he told her she looked wonderful when she swished her sword after school, while no one was looking. She was getting irritated while her friends were gushing. They wanted to know if she and the first prince had a special relationship. And now there was a rumor that with him wanting to see her happy face, he supposedly lost this time on purpose. She finally understood his methods and wouldn't be baited by his provocation again. From that point on, he tried to greet her in the morning, and she'd ignore it. During break, she'd ignore it. In the evening, she'd ignore it until she finally asked why he always appeared where she was around. He answered it was just coincidence, and seeing her get angry, he chuckled. He thought it was so interesting to see the icy Rose get so riled up. Even though most considered her the emotionless type, having observed her for a while now, he could tell how she felt leaped through her face. To this, she closed her eyes, asking if he could tell what she was thinking right now. His answer? Just disappear somewhere already, you sly prince. She was in disbelief that he knew. The two talked about Prince Kyle, whom she hadn't seen lately since he'd been demoted to regular class. She remembered Kyle said he was going to get revenge, but now wondered if the reason he hadn't yet was because Julius was keeping him away. Staring at her directly, he said, "See, it's all over your face again." Touching her silver hair, he called it gorgeous. He couldn't forgive the idea his brother wanted to chop it off. He then said, "Moreover, among those I have ever laid eyes on, you are the most interesting, peculiar creature." She responded, "Excuse me?" Having apparently found her to be a rare living being for observation, he then began to pull out his peculiar creature notes with her personal page listed as a 5-star ultra rare, then asked her to be his fiancée instead, promising to treat her better. She coldly declined, and just like that, her anger and stress piled up to an unbelievable degree. She's always dreamed of punching the two princes, and now all of that pent-up rage was being unleashed with Tyranneza as the trigger. She felt so much better now. Kyle started freaking out over this, but hearing he might be next, he felt back. But of course, everyone who took the prince's side made her mad too. They dared to support the ridiculous engagement cancellation and waste all of her suffering up until now. That's why she decided to glove up and punch everyone. They tried calling the guards her way, but she'd quickly chant sleep magic to knock them out. The top student at the academy in both studies and combat was the worst person to piss off. She then uppercut the man offering his daughter to whoever could defeat her. Then the man who offered his wife to defeat her. What the cuck is this? Then the next man offered a dozen of his slaves for protection. Even though slavery was illegal in this country, wow, a lot of these guys had secret slaves to offer. Scarlet saw Prince Kyle's supporters as disgusting pigs worse than vermin, who only thought of licking the sweat of others. To be able to punch these pigs with all her heart was the best feeling for her. Casting a speed-enhancing spell, she began to punch one after the other. And now one of them remembered the moniker she earned, the Mad Dog Princess, before he got his lights knocked out. Last, of course, was Prince Kyle. She asked him to escort her for the final dance, and midway through her swing, her brother told her to stop. But it was way too late. Julius thought this was pretty funny though. She was all refreshed now that you've hyped the video and subscribed to my channel, because here at My Shoujo Weekly, you already know I'm like the Library of Alexandria for Villainous anime. I've got a whole playlist you should watch after you finish this one, of course. And if you want some more content outside of that, I also live stream on my second channel, ComfyTea Live, where I play the latest games. Next week, I'm going hard for the release of Pokemon Legends ZA, so come by and chill. I'd really love if you did. Alright, back to the video. After knocking out everyone's lights, Leonardo was scared to approach Scarlet. All the while, she was irritated at the sight of Julius. The prince asked what caused her to beat up everyone, and she answered that they had committed unforgivable deeds, and rather than be remorseful, they continued audacious acts. So, she had to punish them. In other words, they pissed her off, so she punched their teeth in. Julius had always wondered when she would unleash her fists, and he didn't like the fact that he wasn't there to witness the nobles getting beaten up. Leonardo feared their family name would be ruined because of Scarlet's actions. After 10 years of peace, he had no idea how to explain this to their parents. While Julius knows Scarlet wouldn't be held responsible for this, her vision grew blurry, and suddenly, she collapsed. Hearing the familiar sound of the bell of the Church of Cronoa, God of Time, Scarlet realized she had used too much of Cronoa's power. She awoke to a maid holding a knife to her chest, but Scarlet was unfazed and asked who exactly she was. Before the maid could pierce her, she punched the maid, sending her crashing into the wall. Leonardo rushed in after hearing a huge explosion, but was surprised to see Scarlet was doing fine. The maid, however, was literally halfway into the wall. Leonardo wasn't too happy. Just 3 days after waking up, and this was the first thing Scarlet did, he mentioned the doctor wasn't sure what was wrong with Scarlet, and feared she would never wake up again. He caressed her hand, calling her a big fool. Scarlet would then apologize for her reckless behavior. Her brother then asked her to promise never to hit anyone again, but that was taking it too far. Of course she wouldn't promise that. Julius then came, glad to see Scarlet finally awake. He mentioned that the royal family had finally terminated her engagement. Her father also gave his assent, and Kyle lost his royal status for causing so much trouble. Rumors had also begun spreading about the slave traders in the Second Prince's faction. With this chance, they would all eventually be caught. Scarlet wouldn't be punished because the royal family saw her as too valuable. However, she'd remain single for a while until other domestic matters were handled. On the bright side, Julius claimed she had gained something priceless in exchange. Rumors of her deeds were already spreading around the city. Everyone was talking about the champion who sent a horde of evil, filthy nobles to prison with just her fists. As she stood alone, covered in blood, beautiful and terrible, she was given the nickname, the Blood-Stained Lady. Leonardo freaked out hearing this. Just when it seemed like people had forgotten about the Mad Dog Princess, Scarlet went and got herself another frightening nickname. Julius then explained the upcoming days would be quite interesting, especially since the nobles Scarlet had exposed were important men in the national government. Most of them would have to be replaced. The most pressing matter of all was the organizer of the idiots in the Second Prince's faction, Prime Minister Godwin Benet Carmine. They needed to find a way to deal with him. The king and Prince Julius suspected someone was pulling the strings behind the Second Prince's factions, and so they decided to deal with all the rotten aristocrats at once. For this, Julius mentioned they had formed an organization known as the Crown Investigatory Office, or CIO, and Leonardo was currently the head of the organization. Seeing that her brother had been quite overwhelmed and stressed as of late, Scarlet questioned if this was because of the time he'd been spending with Julius, while the prince argued it was mostly due to all the problems she had caused. However, to Leo though, it was actually the both of them stressing him out. Julius would introduce Sigurd Forgrave, the one who exposed the Prime Minister's plots. He had been deployed by the CIO to infiltrate the Second Prince's faction. He trembled before Scarlet, apologizing for the way he had badly treated her in the past. She thought he had completely sworn fealty to Prince Kyle, and teased how his performance was quite convincing. Sigurd was riddled with guilt, begging for her forgiveness. Julius permitted her to do whatever she needed to put Sigurd's actions behind her, and stop resenting him. Of course, she was prepared to punch him mercilessly, and Sigurd, without a second thought, resigned himself to her fists. Admiring his resolve, Scarlet swung with all her might, but it was only a feint. She tapped Sigurd's cheek, and decided it was all behind them now, having recalled he had saved her on other occasions as well. Sigurd replied he was only doing his duty as a knight, and didn't feel deserving of her mercy. Scarlet was sure her friends at the academy would have heard of the incident at the ball, and would be worried. She made up her mind to explain herself to them soon. Now, she'd be able to spend as much time with them as she liked, just like she had always dreamed of. Scarlet was glad she had punched all those nobles, but she never for once thought the Prime Minister would be behind it all. She had her suspicions about the one who sent the maid to kill her this morning. She then went to the shed and noticed the uniform of the maid who was tied up there left behind. Suddenly, a beast charged at her, but she knocked it down with a fierce chop. She found its behavior unacceptable because maids of their household were to be composed, silent in step, and voiceless unless called upon. Above all, they were to meet their master's expectations. Scarlet then told the beastkin, Nanaka, that she had only come to talk, but if it preferred to fight, then she wanted it to at least take on its human form, so she could punch it properly. Nanaka then transformed into a human, revealing himself to be a femboy, and the same maid who attacked Scarlet earlier. She then noticed the slave crest on his chest. Anyone who bore the mark had no choice but to carry out the orders of their assigned masters. She offered to free the boy of his mark, and in return, he would give her information about the one who sent him. The boy told her to try her best, sounding doubtful that she would succeed. She then pinned him to the ground and cast a spell to reverse time, then explaining all the people born in this world were favored by one of many gods. Most people would go their entire lives never realizing the god who favored them, but the ones who did were allowed to manifest their god's powers. That power was also known as a blessing. Afterwards, the boy's slave mark was gone. Scarlet explained she had only restored his body to how it was before. This was the power of reversal, part of the blessings of Cronoa. It was also the reason the royal family wanted to secure her place in the kingdom. However, it had a lot of limitations and drained Scarlet's energy quickly. She would die if she overused it. Her overuse of acceleration was what caused her to pass out during the ball. Of course, the boy had to keep this power a secret or she would punish him. He then revealed it was the Prime Minister who hired him to attack her because she had attacked his son, Heine, during her violent display at the ball. However, Nanaka wasn't originally sent to kill her, but to spy on House Vendimion. Godwin had sent different spies into all kinds of noble houses to exploit their weaknesses, persuading them to partake in slave trades and accept bribes. That's how he got more people on his side. After hearing this, Scarlet made up her mind to kick the Prime Minister's butt. Nanaka warned that Godwin was always protected by guards, and advised her to wait for Julius and her brother. But Scarlet was determined to beat up Godwin before he got arrested. She believed it was ladylike to punch those who annoyed her. Nanaka then mentioned that Godwin attended slave auctions once a month, and the next one was in a week. Though he didn't know where it would be held, he could get Scarlet in contact with the slave trader. However, he wanted to go along to get revenge on Godwin, since he enslaved him. Scarlet then agreed to bring him along, and unbeknownst to them, Julius was eavesdropping on their whole conversation. 3 days later, while they passed through the slums, Scarlet showed Nanaka a mithril ore she had bought from a kid for 1 gold coin. She had never seen such a drab color. Because it was actually a regular rock, she had no idea she'd been swindled. Scarlet then asked Julius why he had joined them, and he brought up how she was looking for a slave trader connected to Godwin. But she felt he should be pursuing his own ways towards exposing Godwin. Julius added he'd be locked up in the castle after the academy to learn the proper ways a king should rule. He wanted to use this chance to see what life was like in his kingdom. If he had to rule, he wanted to do his best to create the perfect kingdom. And if Scarlet was seeking out its dark corners, it was important for him to accompany her. His real reason? He couldn't miss out on something so amusing, revealing he had overheard their conversation in the cabin, and it set his heart aflutter. Some ugly thugs then approached them, and upon seeing them, Scarlet's eyes sparkled with so much excitement. As she put on her gloves, ready for a brawl, Nanaka calmed her down, reasoning they could discuss with the thugs first. Nanaka told the thugs they were looking for a middleman named Junk, and they would pay to be brought to him. The thugs weren't cooperative. All they cared about was stealing all their money. They had heard Scarlet was swindled into buying a regular rock, so the hoodlums felt this was an easy catch. Furious, Scarlet crushed the rock in her palms. Now, she had to buy a new one. As the thugs rushed towards, she threw the rock particles at them, and quickly used her blessing to enhance her strength. Together, with her acceleration skill, she started beating up the thugs and tossing them around. After knocking out 3 of them, she felt a lot better. Taking notice of her features, one of the thugs with an eye patch realized she was Scarlet, the Lady of Beatings. Hearing the nickname, Julius couldn't help but chuckle. Scarlet knocked out the guy with an eye patch quickly, and for the last, who claimed the strong preyed on the weak, she figured she was allowed to do anything to him. After being disarmed, the guy begged for his life, but Scarlet asked if he had ever spared those who begged him in the past. If he was going to trample on others, then he needed to be prepared for the tables to turn on him. Just before she could knock out his lights, he quickly brought up Junk, the middleman, saying Junk usually hid in a bar that wasn't too far from here. Scarlet thanked him for the information, then landed the final blow. She then asked Julius what he was doing while she was fighting. He answered that he was watching closely, in case he had to intervene. However, she wouldn't have appreciated if he did that. Julius then asked if she was aware of the expression she was making. He said it was the sour expression of someone who wanted to hit more people. Scarlet doubted it, but he told her she didn't have to lie to herself. The way she was now was the most amusing thing he could imagine, and this got on her nerves. As for Junk, the prince wanted to confront him alone. Unlike Scarlet, he didn't intend to use violence. Scarlet and Nanaka waited outside the bar. Julius then returned to them, stating he had the name and location of the slave merchant. Scarlet asked how he got the information, wondering if he used violent means, but the prince only scared Junk a little by fooling him with a lie. She questioned the prince if he was aware he had talent as a con man, but Julius was disappointed to see that she underestimated him quite a bit. At the least, she was sure he lacked empathy for others. For their next step, they looked to Nanaka for ideas on how to infiltrate the slave auction. Days later, Lord Zatharin welcomed Scarlet to his office. He had heard she was looking for a rare slave. Still, he felt it was beneath her as an aristocrat to go as far as dealing with a reprobate like Junk. Scarlet claimed she had no choice, and then asked about Zatharin's relationship with Junk. However, he could hardly call it a relationship. He simply signed a contract with Junk to have him bring any valuable slaves that ended up in the slums. Scarlet would question what he meant by valuable, and he answered when it came to matters of slaves, he didn't discriminate, whether it be elves, dwarves, avians, or demons. Noticing Nanaka was a beastkin, Zathrin deemed he would fetch quite a price. Scarlet asked how he could tell Nanaka was a beastkin, and he replied that it was quite obvious from appearance. He also expected her to bring a fine specimen of hers as well, while laughing like a maniac. It irritated Scarlet so much, she was ready to punch him, but Nanaka advised her not to do it. Zathrin then asked what kind of slave she was looking for, but Scarlet brought up the upcoming slave auction, letting him know that she wished to attend. He explained she would need to undergo a review where she would reveal her status and enact at least 6 slave transactions. This would likely take a year. However, time wasn't on her side, so she offered to pay as much as he wanted. Zathrin didn't want her money though, but was willing to take her under the guise as the daughter of a distant relative, only if she sold Nanaka to him. Scarlet's expression became grim, but she suddenly lit up and happily accepted his offer. With that, the plan was a success. Zathrin had done exactly as Nanaka thought he would. Yet, Nanaka was surprised that Scarlet could actually resolve some things without beating up anybody. With the auction coming up in 3 nights, Scarlet asked him if he was sure of this decision, since she wouldn't be able to guarantee his safety in the hands of Zathrin. Nanaka speculated Zathrin wouldn't bring him under any harm until he was sold off. But not only was he doing it for the mission, he also wanted to make up for trying to take Scarlet's life. He suddenly became sleepy, since his kind were nocturnal. As he dozed off, he transformed back into his animal form, and Scarlet carried him back to the inn. Coming into the room, she informed Julius that everything went well. He too was surprised that she managed to resolve the matter without punching anyone. His comment pissed her off. He wished he could have seen such a rare sight. But the Prince of the Kingdom couldn't simply go off buying slaves. After laying Nanaka on the couch, Scarlet decided to go get some fresh air. And what a coincidence! Julius also wanted to step out as well. As he walked behind her, she asked how long he was going to keep following her. But Julius claimed he supposedly had business down the same street. One of the street vendors called out Scarlet, asking her to try his delicious apple pie. And he'd even throw in a free apple if she bought one. Julius would go ahead to buy 2, and received 2 free apples. But Scarlet was getting really fed up with him, and soon after, every vendor would try to sell something to her, and Julius would buy. Once again, she asked Julius if he still had business down the same street, but he admitted it was all a lie, and he teased her for falling for it. Scarlet wanted nothing more than to punch his face, but she settled for the nearest wall. The moment she decided to return to the inn, the prince would stuff her mouth with a piece of apple pie, and she couldn't believe how wonderful it tasted. The flavor of apples and honey filling every corner of her mouth felt divine. Julius apologized for going a bit overboard. Still, Scarlet wasn't about to allow him to buy back her favor so easily. But after he offered her his piece of pie, she decided he was back in her good graces once more. Sitting by a bench, Scarlet noticed the prince was quite familiar with the city. He brought up how he used to slip away from the academy once in a while to look around, though she believed he was really just skipping classes. He asked her what she thought of the kingdom's prized merchant's quarter. Scarlet recalled when she used to buy lunch for Kyle here, she never had the time to look around, but now she could see it was quite a lively place, admitting she enjoyed her time here. The prince was happy to hear this. He had always thought of making her try the apple pie he gave earlier. Hearing this, Scarlet wondered if he had been meaning to show her around the merchant's quarter. She felt that if he had admitted that, she wouldn't have been so unkind. He was truly a rebel. Julius then mentioned that he hated feeling bored. At a younger age, the things that interested him were twisted and ugly. As the first prince, he was surrounded by fools who tried to garner his favor and get things from him. However, he would notice Scarlet alone when Kyle came to bully her. Julius then told her that she didn't have to suffer in silence, and she could tell his father if she was frightened. To this, Scarlet mocked the idea of her being frightened of the second prince, calling it a joke, and at that moment, Julius's eyes grew wider in amazement. Since most things in the world bored him, he wanted at least this small corner of the world he inhabited to be full of things that interested him. And right now, the most interesting thing to him was Scarlet. He suddenly kissed her cheek, causing her heart to race. Julius realized what he felt wasn't the same as the traditional romantic love, but one thing was for sure, Scarlet was dear to him. more dear than anything else in this world. By evening, she laid in her bed, wondering if this was just another way the prince was trying to tease her. The following day, she returned to Zatharin to complete their deal. However, he decided to confirm first if Nanika was truly a beastkin. She asked if he doubted her, and Zatharin replied it wasn't entirely new for a wicked person to dress up their slave as a rare breed to gain a higher price. So, Scarlet would order Nanika to transform into his beast form, and upon doing so, Zatharin was amazed, saying Nanika would be the crown jewel of the auction. Out of nowhere, a huge man stormed into the office, mistaking Scarlet for a slave. Zatharin referred to him as Donovan, and explained that she was simply a customer. Scarlet noticed he was half human, half magibeast, which made her wonder if he was a lycanthrope. Nanika growled aggressively at Donovan, as Zatharin pointed out he was the slave to be taken. Donovan then mentioned beastkin were known for their quick regeneration. He then put a collar on Nanika and forced him to get going, but Nanika would resist. Enraged, Donovan was about to whip him, but Scarlet quickly held the whip, letting Zatharin know that Donovan needed a bit more discipline, and if Donovan was too stupid to learn, she threatened to administer proper punishment in his stead. Hearing this, Donovan shot back, threatening to rip her apart. Zatharin then warned her not to provoke him, because Donovan was a former A-rank adventurer. She'd have to be on the same level as a knight captain to handle him. But Scarlet wasn't the least bit fazed. Donovan, as well, wasn't about to let her off easy just because she was a woman, or even a customer. He tried pulling out his whip from her grasp, but struggled with comical immenseness. Zatharin thought he was joking around, but Donovan was seriously using all his strength. Scarlet then asked if Donovan was going to be put up for auction, but he was just Zatharin's personal bodyguard and trainer for the other slaves. In that case, Scarlet wouldn't hesitate to beat him up. With a flick of her wrist, she flipped Donovan into the air and punched him so hard he was sent flying over the horizon. She was glad to have meted out her punishment. She then took the collar off of Nanako and healed his wounds. Thereafter, she gave him a warm hug, assuring him she would be back for him soon. As for the broken window, Zatharin was too scared to take any payment from her for it. In fact, he claimed he was happy with her actions, because he'd been having a hard time disciplining Donovan, and he promised not to bring any more harm to her precious merchandise. On her way back to the inn, she recognized the carriage parked in front. Her brother stepped out, looking furious, and demanded an explanation from her as soon as they returned to the palace. Leonardo was losing it at both her and Julius for being so reckless. Even though they had gotten the location of the slave auction, Leonardo was not having it, especially from the prince. He also didn't want to see Scarlet throwing herself into danger. Despite her nicknames, he still saw her as an innocent maiden at 17. Julius then asked about his investigation, and Leo revealed Godwin was the organizer of the auction. With 2 nights remaining until the auction, Leo panicked. Meanwhile, Julius noticed Scarlet staring at him and told her he had no apple pie, but if she wanted, he was willing to send a servant. However, she got angry at him for making it seem like she was a glutton. Leo wanted Scarlet to return home before the auction, but she refused, which made him question why she was so determined. She answered since her engagement to Prince Kyle was cancelled till now, she had gone through a lot. She stopped holding back and became the Mad Dog Princess once more, beating up more men than she could count. She also met different kinds of people: slaves forced to carry out orders, children begging in the streets, rotten nobles trying to enrich themselves, and even a golden-haired boy who loved provoking her. Since childhood, she had wondered why the good-hearted had to suffer, and the wicked prospered. Those who trampled on the weak were cunning and couldn't be punished normally, with Godwin and his cohorts being at the pinnacle of this. Even though she knew little of the world, she was certain that those self-serving, greedy nobles were the most delightful to punch. Plus, the only person allowed to punch them was the daughter of a prominent duke like herself. Hearing this broke Julius into laughter, while Leo felt anguish. Leo was particularly worried about their family's name. He also feared Godwin was connected to the Vanquish Empire. For the past 300 years, Vanquish had been having border skirmishes with Palestine. It was a land of might makes right, governed by dragon riders. Scarlet thought they had established friendly relations with them since the last peace talks. However, Leo believed the Vanquish Aerial Corps, the Red Sky Dragoons, might have recently come in contact with Godwin. In his home, Godwin met with 2 hooded dragon riders, asking them to get rid of Scarlet. As they left, Terraneza presented a flintlock before Godwin, saying it was a present from goddess Palmia. Godwin didn't understand what it could do, so she displayed its firepower by blasting a vase in the room. She wanted him to use it without mercy against those who stood in his way. Scarlet arrived at the auction house venue, thanking Zathrin for the invite. He would then give her a mask to wear, and she hoped they could make favorable purchases. Though she knew it would be for the last time. Julius had reasoned that if the Vanquish's Red Sky Dragoons were really involved in this, it was all the more reason to approve Scarlet's undercover presence. They could probably get about 10 of their CIO agents into the auction. Naturally, they'd be forced to surrender their weapons within the auction venue. So, the prince decided to send in skilled combatants, but only if they were armed. Even if they used magic, they would likely struggle to take Godwin into custody. But Scarlet, being their trump card, was capable even without weapons. And if she could lay out everyone behind the slave auctions, including Godwin, her new bloody nickname would likely be the kingdom's iron-fisted savior. Leo was informed that the palace knights were in place. They would enter once they got the signal from Julius. Everything was ready. All that was left was for Scarlet to hold to her word. Earlier on, he had asked her to avoid any unnecessary fights. But recalling the way she sparkled as she thanked him, Leo's stomach was churning. And now, he wished he had called the whole thing off. Inside the hall, Scarlet walked around as the nobles discussed the various slaves they were eager to buy. Suddenly, the lights went off, and a man bumped into her. As he apologized, Scarlet thought she recognized his voice. The spotlight then came on, and the host commenced the start of the slave auction. The audience was fired up, eager to purchase the slaves they had their eyes on. Some had even dipped into taxpayer money for this. Man, that's crazy work. With everyone being so well prepared, a lady feared she might not have enough money. But the man next to her laughed, commenting on how she had seduced Palmian priests and took them for quite a sum. The auction began with a rare, one-winged avian. As the nobles began placing their bids, Julius walked up to Scarlet to check on her. He asked if she had found Godwin, but not yet. However, she had a few ideas where he might be. The prince let her know that the palace knights were waiting on his signal, and if she didn't hurry, her targets could be taken away. Scarlet would propose a trade. She intended to properly clobber Godwin, so she asked the prince to tell the knights to hold off a while longer. Of course, nothing would delight Julius more. The whole reason he joined the undercover team was to watch her punch that fool. He asked what she would give in return for fulfilling her request, and Scarlet then vowed her unwavering loyalty to the crown and kingdom for the rest of her life. But Julius didn't want her to vow to the crown. He held her softly by the chin, asking her to swear loyalty to only him. She still saw it as the same thing, given he was next in line for the throne. But the prince couldn't wait. He wanted her to swear her loyalty now. That was his condition, and she slowly swore to him. Julius still asked if he could trust her on that, and she felt it was unfair. He had already coerced her, though he saw it as nothing new. She then pointed out that Godwin was seated above, overlooking the hall, which meant it was time for the show. A once-in-a-lifetime pummeling spectacle by Scarlet L. Vendimian. She told the prince he was free to be in the audience, but she may go off script and punch a certain golden-haired lord as well. So, he was advised to maintain caution. Now, Scarlet was about to see the one her fists had longed for, their beloved punching bag. Meanwhile, a little elven girl cried out as she was being separated from her parents. Nanika told her not to struggle since there was no point. One of the slaves there prayed to Saint Diana to save them, but another claimed the saint didn't give a damn about their prayers. Nanika then assured the elven girl that her parents would be safe. He was counting on Scarlet. Scarlet had managed to knock out the guards, and Julius praised her excellent control. But his compliments failed to please her. Ever since he beat her out of first place on their magic exam, she still hadn't gotten over that. Soon after, they came across some rugged-looking men. Scarlet happily put on her fighting gloves, ready to make a party out of beating them. She made quick work, punching them to the tune of the orchestra. She punched the last person so hard, he broke through the doors of Godwin's room, and Scarlet revealed herself to him. Heine was furious seeing her, and grew more upset when she asked about his convalescence. He then told his father that he would handle this, and began calling upon the power of lightning in the palm of his hands. But Julius decreed with his royal authority that the spell was not permitted, nullifying it. The ring he had was the royal seal, which could cancel spells cast by anyone in the kingdom. Seeing him use it, Godwin realized he was the sparkling Prince Julius. The other nobles didn't want to believe it was truly the prince because they'd be ruined, and called him an imposter. Godwin then signaled for Donovan to be brought in. and he ordered him to kill Scarlet and Julius. That's when Sigurd would show up, slicing Donovan's hands. Julius wondered where he'd gone off to all the while, but Sigurd said it was the prince who lost him to go off on his own. Scarlet also recalled Sigurd being the meat sack she bumped into earlier. Godwin then sent everyone to attack. Sigurd warned Scarlet and Julius to get away, but she dragged him back, making it clear that these meat sacks were for her, and not him. She only permitted him to fight the lycanthrope. As for the corrupt nobles, she wanted them for herself. Filled with so much joy, Scarlet swung a noble around by his feet while she laughed. The force of the swing caused a typhoon and sent all the other nobles crashing around the room. In mere moments, the venue erupted with terrified screams. Upon entering the auction house, Leo realized why they never got the signal. His sister had stooped to mass murder. However, Scarlet didn't kill anyone. She only used the back of her sword. But that didn't make sense to Leo, considering he saw her whole body as a blade. Meanwhile, Sigurd was still in a fight with Donovan. The patrons were also escaping, and Julius didn't think they could hold back the knights any longer. But Scarlet was still eager to punch Godwin. However, Julius would ask Leo to go after the minister, and he assured Scarlet that Godwin would be clobbered by her hands only. He explained to Leo that he had exchanged vows with Scarlet, so he had to honor his word, and she even confirmed swearing her life to him. Leo clearly misunderstood. He was so happy, especially since he had given up on her ever finding that kind of happiness. Scarlet didn't understand his reaction, but was happy to see her brother happy. To Julius, they were both way too clueless. The prince then gave the signal for the knights to move in. Using his clairvoyance skill, Leo scanned the auction house and found Godwin fleeing with his son. They were heading for the roof through the central stairway. But something greater would catch Leo's attention. A dragon was approaching the roof. This confirmed Godwin was working with the Red Sky Dragoons. If he escaped to Vanquish Kingdom, he'd be out of their reach. With the roof being on the 5th floor, Leo doubted they'd made it in time. Scarlet then removed her shoes, so she could give it her all. She asked her brother to look after Nanaka and the others, and activating her acceleration skill, she burst through the tires. By speeding up time around her, she could move faster than a normal human, and in seconds, she arrived at the rooftop. Although it certainly took a toll on her body, she wouldn't let such finely aged meat escape her. Approaching the dragon rider, Heine demanded a common soldier like him to get down from the dragon and greet men of high station like themselves on the ground. But the rider saw them as garbage and ordered the dragon to take care of them. As the beast was about to slap them away with its tail, Scarlet would swoop in, stopping it with her bare hands. She saved Godwin, but Heine was crushed beneath her feet. Seeing how she stopped the dragon with her bare hands, the rider got down and threw off his cloak. He got on his knees and professed his love for Scarlet, asking for her hand in marriage. Even the dragon was stunned, and so was I. She refused and sent him flying with a single slap. The dragon tried to get back at her for harming its master, but she'd subdue it easily. This caused the dragon rider to fall even harder for her. He asked her to accept his courtship, but she declined once more with a punch. But that wasn't enough to stop him from complimenting her gorgeous blue eyes, like a jewelry box containing all the world's gems. She then kicked him away, and yup, he came back, staggering on his spear, begging her to come with him. Scarlet then asked if he should really be putting his attention on her or Godwin, whom he came to slay. She then referred to him as the first prince of the Vanquish Empire, Alflame Rare Vanquish. He smiled, pointing his blade as he confirmed he was here to kill Godwin and his impudent men. The minister complained, highlighting how he had given Alflame a lot of information, and the prince had promised to make him a minister in Vanquish. But given how he had sold out one kingdom already, there was no way Prince Alflame would trust him with the fate of another. Alflame threw his spear at Godwin, but Scarlet would shatter it, refusing to let another person take her meat. He then seized one of her legs, and she noticed he held his endurance in high esteem. Flame had been given the blessing, metallization, by the god of steel, Meteor. This gave him an invulnerable body that could withstand any physical attack. He could tell that she was blessed too, but claimed she couldn't defeat him with bare-fisted blows. However, Scarlet responded that she knew exactly how to defeat him. Wrapping her hands around his neck, she would smash his face against her continuously. After so many blows to the head with her knee, Alflame became dizzy and slowly fell to the ground before realizing he was suffering from a concussion. But this didn't stop him from still asking for her hand. Man, this guy is so down bad. It reminds me of this clip from Cowboy Bebop.
I love the kind of woman that will actually just kill me.
So, Scarlet used her acceleration skill to send him blasting off again. Now, she could finally have a moment with Godwin. He began begging for his life, and in the process, he apologized for using Terraneza to break up her engagement to Prince Kyle. He was only following Terraneza's plans and offered to give Scarlet information if she spared his life. According to him, Terraneza wasn't actually from this world, but was reincarnated from another by the power of a goddess. Scarlet had no idea what Godwin was talking about. She only wanted to start punching him. He offered to get her anything she desired with his authority. So, she requested a shifty-eyed, pointy-nosed, and well-padded punching bag. As Godwin realized she was talking about him, she activated her magic skill, Overclock. In the realm she created, time moved 100 times slower. Only she could move normally. She then started beating up Godwin. One punch for the kingdom's subjects he exploited, one punch for the slaves he tormented, one punch for Nanaka, who he treated like a toy, and one punch for herself, whom he tried to kill. And the last one was just because she wanted to punch his lights out. As time reverted to normal, Godwin was hit by the impact of all the punches at once. Scarlet knew her brother would be angry at her for overusing her blessing, which caused her to bleed and her beautiful silver hair to turn black. Falling backwards, Julius would catch her and heal her hands. Looking at the scene, he couldn't believe a human fought here. The others soon ran in to check on her. Scarlet assured everyone she was fine and apologized to Nanaka for not coming to save him herself, but he was just glad that she was safe. Suddenly, Godwin appeared in front of them and shot Scarlet, but Julius would shield her with his body. Enraged, she attacked him, but he laughed at her, saying her punches didn't affect him because of the magic pendant he wore. So she ripped it off. It was the Holy Maiden's pendant, which held the power of Goddess Palmia, and he demanded it back. So Scarlet fed it back to him with her fists. She couldn't stand the fact of losing Julius to a lowlife like him, and she kicked him off the roof. With this, she had avenged the prince and prayed he would watch over them from the heavens, only to find out he wasn't even dead, thanks to Leo's healing magic. Julius asked Scarlet if she was disappointed to see him still alive, and she smiled, letting him know she was glad to see him well. Afterwards, all the corrupt nobles were arrested, and the slaves were freed. Scarlet felt so much better after getting what she was after. Alflame's comrade would later find him stuck in a tree, and kick it to get him down. He believed Alflame's body was too sturdy to take any damage from a falling tree, but Alflame explained he was only able to survive after using up all his blessings. As they rode the dragon back, he told his comrade he couldn't wait to meet Scarlet again. News of Godwin's arrest spread throughout town, and there were those who believed it was all thanks to Scarlet. Now, they were calling her the kingdom's iron-fisted savior. Some girls were gushing, thinking maybe Scarlet's favorite pet was an elegant white cat or a wise dog. However, Scarlet had trained Rex, the dragon, for herself, making Nanaka jealous. Cervantes approached her, talking about the items she had requested him to develop. He had asked the traders to have them stock her new line of Godwin punching bags, but didn't know if they would sell well. Scarlet was certain they would, since they seemed to be a big hit, with Julius at least. He then pointed out Nanaka, who had been staring and desiring affection from her. So, Scarlet opened her arms to him, and he whooped to snuggle her warmly. In an underground prison, Terraneza was walking through when the guards told her visitors weren't allowed. She used magic to brainwash them into allowing her to pass. What were her goals? She was after a happy ending, to fall madly in love with a handsome prince, overcome countless trials to be with him, and become a princess beloved by all. Upon seeing her, Godwin offered to gladly serve Goddess Palmia if she would let him out. She replied she was grateful that he suppressed Dianism to make Palminianism the state religion. So, she offered him the blessing of the goddess by tampering with his mind and leaving him poison to kill himself with. After bidding him goodbye, her next objective was to tear down the hateful villainess Scarlet L. Vendimion from her glorious stage. News of Godwin's death reached Julius. He doubted the Prime Minister was the type to off himself. Leo found it suspicious, and also concerning that Terraneza was unaccounted for. Nanaka then entered, bringing an item Leo had requested. On the other hand, Julius wondered just who Terraneza was. He also noticed some troublesome people were getting involved with the religion of Palmianism. There were two major religious organizations in the kingdom. One had been gaining believers among people in power in recent years. That was Palmianism. It was a religion that worshipped Palmia, the goddess of beauty and love. and was led by a Novurish merchant who lacked any hint of gravity. Nanaka could see how it had ties to Godwin. This religion was the kind of thing corrupt nobles would be all over. The other religion that existed since the kingdom's founding was Dianism. It venerates Saint Diana, a girl with the power of exorcism. It wasn't the state religion, but more people felt it was more deserving of the title. With the Dianism ceremony coming up soon, Julius was counting on Leo to handle it. He was sure this year's Holy Land pilgrimage would be anything but simple. It may even put a severe burden on Scarlet as well. Leo confirmed his sister was doing much better. Yesterday, she even decided to go hunt food for her dragon herself. Julius thought of her as a really interesting woman. With Scarlet by his side, he'd never get bored. He considered really asking for her hand in marriage, but Leo believed they had already sworn their lives to each other. Julius couldn't wait until he found out the truth. For now, he decided to go see his beloved. Several days later, Scarlet was on her way home after a nice dragon ride. Her friends, Rosalia Ray Madeline and Envy Mel Champagne, had come to see her. Upon seeing the dragon, they quickly cast their magic to stop it. Later, they'd have tea with Scarlet and explain they mistook Rex for an enemy. After all, dragons were mounts used by a hostile kingdom. Scarlet was glad to see her friends hadn't changed. In the month she had been away, Envy held absolute power over the academy dorm. Rosa then called out her lie, explaining that Envy had just been bored without her rival there. She exposed how Envy had bought up all the healing potions around town, but before saying more, Envy threatened to seal her mouth with ice magic. Since Scarlet was her roommate, Envy was hoping she'd recover quickly and return to tidy up the dorm. Rosa teased about how she'd been crying about missing Scarlet. However, Envy denied it, saying she wanted to graduate fast and marry a fine gentleman. Scarlet had heard rumors of Envy having many suitors, but Envy found them all unserious. She wanted the kind of person who would risk their life for her. Scarlet's expression then became grim as she thought back to when Julius had shielded her. Rosa then asked about her intentions for marriage. Nanaka would then enter the room, letting her know Julius had come to visit. He wanted to check up on her recovery, and upon seeing the prince, Rosa and Envy were flustered. On the other hand, Scarlet told him he was imposing on her time with her friends. Of course, they didn't feel the same. They were honored to see him outside of school. Julius asked to borrow Scarlet for a bit, which seemed to annoy her. Holding her hand with a sparkly gaze, he said he wanted to talk about something privately. Rosa and Envy squealed at how dashing he was, agreeing to allow him to borrow Scarlet as long as he wanted. Scarlet felt betrayed. While they took a walk, Prince Julius told her about Godwin's death. He had investigated Terraneza in accordance with her report, but Kyle knew nothing about her. He had no other leads, and Terraneza's current whereabouts were unknown. Scarlet understood this wasn't something they could discuss in front of her friends. Julius asked if she was hoping to hear something else, but she couldn't imagine anything. Then asked if there was something else he wanted to say. He brought up how her hair hadn't fully gone back to normal. She considered visiting a hot spring. It was said that the waters could ease physical and mental harm caused by blessings. The prince agreed, considering she was indispensable to the kingdom. He didn't want to lose her over something so trivial. She felt the same, and asked him to never do something as foolish as risking his life to save her. Naturally, she was happy to be considered important by the royal family. She realized that the blessing of the god of time, Cronoa, was important. Julius would interrupt her, asking if he could pick the roses in the garden. He reminded her of the time they went shopping in the merchant's district in Grand Hilda. Long ago, his parents would disguise themselves as commoners to enjoy time together there. Scarlet was surprised, commenting that they had such an austere air about them. Julius's father showered his wife with gifts and marriage proposals as many times as there were stars in the sky. The wife found it exhausting until he gave her a particular gift. Not a shining crown of gold and jewels, but one made by him with his own hands and all his love. Julius then made a crown of roses for Scarlet, placing it on her head. He said to her, "Scarlet, I need you." When she was by his side, the whole world sparkled in dazzling color. A world where everything once seemed gray and boring. She had given it color with a veil of fresh blood. Holding her face gently, he let her know she had stolen his heart. The prince asked if she would remain with him always. It was a sweet moment, until he referred to her as his most beloved toy. Scarlet suddenly went pale, asking if love was the feeling he put into the rose crown. And it was, but more like love for his exceptionally amusing toy. What a way to ruin the moment. Julius didn't see her as an object of romantic love, and this made Scarlet furious. He was so used to seeing her punch people through walls and beat prime ministers half to death, he nearly forgot she was human. Hearing this, she put on her gloves, requesting to clobber the prince before her. Staring into the night, Scarlet thought about Terraneza's disappearance. and the Palmians scheming, fearing something worse was about to happen. She had gotten a letter from St. Diana, inviting her to the cathedral. No matter what else happened, Scarlet swore to protect her. The following day, she asked her brother for permission to go on a hot springs tour. Leo, oozing with anger, assumed this was just a pretense to punch someone. She questioned his lack of trust in her, and he called her out for her audacity, especially since she lied to him about her vow with Julius. For a moment, Leo thought his sister had found marital bliss, but it wasn't entirely a lie, considering they did make a vow. While serving tea, Nanika asked if she was trying to punch the saint. That's when Leo recalled that Scarlet always took a trip this time of year, and the hot springs route was the same as the Holy Land pilgrimage. However, Scarlet reminded her that the saint was beloved by the people and indispensable to the kingdom. She would never dream of punching such an honored personage. Leo then approved her hot springs tour, and at that very moment, she left. Outside, she was deadpan, meeting Julius, who teased her for taking longer than expected. On the carriage ride, he laughed when he heard Leo thought Scarlet was going to punch the saint. Considering her brother was the head of the CIO, she didn't see why the prince was hiding the fact that she was accompanying him on the Holy Land pilgrimage. But Julius insisted on keeping it a secret because he was looking forward to Leo's reaction when he found out. The prince then brought up how the neighboring realms have been acting suspiciously since the Godwin incident. Even though they dealt with corrupt nobles, the court hadn't yet stabilized. There was a chance there were spies in their midst as well. This was why he wanted these things to be secret from Leo. Holding Scarlet's face, he turned her attention to the wall of impurity surrounding the religious quarters, from which the Holy Land pilgrimage would depart. Scarlet knew it was the headquarters for both Palmianism and Dianism, but it was still quite grandiose. According to Julius, the Palmian Pope said it was necessary to protect the religious quarter from the filth of the worldly realm, but he believed it was most likely there to obscure the Pope's corruption. Palmianism's current head was Pope Sargon. Those who've known him since his days as a corrupt merchant called him the scheming social climber. Hearing this, Scarlet sparkled with excitement. It was obvious she wanted to punch him. Suddenly, the carriage stopped because the gate had been closed on them. The driver asked the guards why they had done this. They responded, telling him that Pope Sargon had issued strict orders that none may pass without approval from His Majesty. Julius knew this was all a ploy to stop the pilgrimage. He stepped out of the carriage, explaining to the guards that the king was currently attending a conference with other realms of the land. This all sounded like an act of childish spite against him. Angered by his words, a man came out, stating that he wouldn't tolerate the way Julius spoke of their Holy Father, asking him to cease the slander at once. He was Jarmov the Ogre, Inquisitor of Palmianism. Seeing him, Scarlet thought about how satisfying it would be to punch him. Jarmov stated the duty of an Inquisitor was to expel the heretics who meant harm to Palmianism, and he claimed this was done with the approval of their supreme goddess, Palmia. Julius doubted the king would approve of such misconduct. Then, he asked if it was the Pope who approved their organization. Jarmov confirmed this, saying Inquisitors were the Pope's trusted retainers. In other words, apostles of their goddess. Displaying his mace, he would use it to deliver punishment unto the heretics. Unknown to him, Julius was using a magic item to record everything he said. Afterwards, he allowed Scarlet to do as she pleased. Wearing her gloves, she decided to start by opening the gate. Jarmov boasted that there was no battering ram nor spell that could put a scratch on the gate. And that's when Scarlet would unleash her magic and simply push the gate, completely destroying it. The guards called her a monster, and Jarmov finally realized who she was. As they heard her name, the guards all ran for their lives. However, Jarmov decided to face her. She borrowed a spear from one of the guards, using it to deflect his attack, but she'd realized he took no damage. It was all thanks to a similar pendant Godwin had used when fighting her. In order to end this quickly, she dashed forward and landed a devastating uppercut that sent Jarmov flying beyond the horizon. It's a saying that punching could solve seemingly impossible dilemmas, though it was obviously only Scarlet who reasoned this way. Afterwards, the Knights of the Holy Order of Diana approached them. Scarlet was glad to see Sir Paragus. Likewise, he was happy to see her safe. He apologized for their late arrival, explaining that they were dealing with scattered rites by what they believed to be worshippers of Palmia. Julie suspected there might be something else they were really after. One of the knights joined up with him, and Paragus was furious, asking where he'd been since. The man told him to chill out, and quickly turned his attention to Scarlet, calling her a hot babe. Julius didn't appreciate his bad manners, and as the guy addressed the prince casually, Paragus would put him in a chokehold. Thereafter, he introduced himself as the head knight of the Holy Order, Dios Westwood. Scarlet could tell that Julius had a hard time dealing with free-willing types like Dios. The head knight would take Scarlet's hand, asking her to become his girlfriend. At this point, Paragus was left dumbfounded. Dios was the son of elvish royalty, which made him a half-elf. Scarlet found him interesting, but wasn't pleased with his disregard for standard social morals. As she was about to flick him away, Julius grabbed his hand, asking Dios to be more respectful. As Dios realized what this was, Julius asked the head knight to leave Scarlet alone, but Dios didn't like taking orders. However, his comrades lashed out at him for his behavior, and then dragged him off. Paragus apologized on Dios' behalf, letting them know he had just joined 1 year ago. Still, he was a talented fighter. Scarlet thought the same, recalling that Dios had noticed when she was about to hit him. She then asked Julius to release her hand, leaving him a bit embarrassed for acting without thinking. Scarlet asked what Dio meant by what this is, but the prince ignored the question, leaving her confused. Soon after, they'd meet Saint Diana. Julius urged that they discuss the pilgrimage ceremony immediately. To preserve the confidential nature of their discussion, he requested a room for the select few of them. Then, they went into a private room, and the prince felt it would have been better with a chaperone. As the door sprang open, Saint Diana rushed to Scarlet, hugging her. She was pretty emotional seeing her. Julius pulled her away, insisting Diana should have greeted him first, but she immediately demanded to be let go. When he asked if they'd need a chaperone, Diana refused because it would reduce the time she could be using to love on Scarlet. The Holy Land pilgrimage was a tradition that began 300 years ago. The kingdom of Palestine was under threat from monsters unleashed by the Demon King, who ruled over the Demon Continent. Little by little, the monsters encroached upon the land, until one day, in a village near the border, a girl appeared with the power of exorcism. Wiping out the monsters, the girl installed holy gems of purification in villages on the border in the 4 cardinal directions and established a barrier. The barrier ended the threat of the monster invasion into Palestine. Unfortunately, the holy gems and the barrier gradually lost effectiveness after the girl died. As the people began to lose hope, a new savior appeared. Her name was Diana, and it was the same name as the first girl who set up the first barrier. She purified the holy gems, restored the barrier, and saved the kingdom from the monster threats. The king then built a cathedral to honor the 2 girls with divine power and made them an object of faith. Since then, anytime the barrier has seemed on the brink of failing, a girl with the power of exorcism has appeared to serve as the symbol of faith, Saint Diana. Looking at the current Diana, Julius felt the past ones had to be rolling in their graves right now. Diana didn't appreciate him looking down on her, especially since she was a simple villager until she was 7. The prince then explained the purpose of the holy pilgrimage was to purify the holy gems and revitalize the barrier. He wanted Diana to take it more seriously, since they would be leaving in a few days to perform the rites. Diana didn't like the fact that she'd stand throughout the whole parade, but it was necessary for believers to see their saint was alive and well. It also helped to keep the Palmians in check. Julius pointed out how she had already lost her powers as a saint, telling her to at least fulfill her role as a figurehead. Scarlet quickly called him to order. Diana didn't mind, but then she left, hoping to see Scarlet later since they were staying over. Scarlet advised Julius to be kinder to Diana. He did a lot of things well, but he couldn't sense the inner workings of a woman's heart. Or perhaps it was a reflection of the pilgrimage's importance. At night, she told Diana stories of the way she punched some nobles. The saint hoped to become like Scarlet someday, so beautiful, strong, and independent of any man. Diana didn't favor young gentlemen. She found them filthy with coarse hair and bulging muscles. Plus, they always bossed her around. She admitted Julius was good looking with a good build, but he was still a jerk in her eyes. Hearing that he treated Scarlet the same way, Diana wanted to punch his face the next time she saw him. She wished there was a silver-haired, blue-eyed, charming prince on a white steed out there who would sweep her away. But Scarlet was completely oblivious to what the saint was getting at. Since it was Diana's bedtime, Scarlet decided to leave, but the saint wanted to talk with her and asked her to stay for the night. With Scarlet refusing, Diana decided to ask for another favor. She was named Diana after the saint, but a lot of other girls had the same name as well, which was why she wanted a different name. So, her father named her Sonia in private. Scarlet figured out what she wanted and wished her a good night, referring to her as Saint Sonia. On her way back to her room, Scarlet wondered what to do about Diana losing her powers. She hoped the departure ceremony would go smoothly. On the day of the pilgrimage, thousands of believers gathered in the streets as the parade passed. As Diana lifted the purifying chalice, the people begged to be blessed by her. They all praised her glory. Scarlet and Julius watched from a distance, acknowledging the parade was a success. At that moment, a loud bang went off, causing the march to stop. As the whole crowd was driven into a panic, the knights tried to calm them down. Scarlet sensed the noise coming from the Palmian Cathedral. Using her acceleration magic, she dashed through the rooftops until she came across a statue of Palmia. She would crush it, collecting the polearm, and now was ready to start her own festival of blood. This is the setup for another violent arc. Subscribe to keep up with next week's part, but for now, watch this next video. It's me, ComfyTea. I'll see you all in the next